Yeah, you do.
Kids up.
Okay, we are live. It is Wednesday afternoon, and we're here again with more introductions to people and organizations with which we'll probably have many conversations with over the course of this biennium for different reasons. And what we have for this afternoon are some of the business organizations. We heard from Chambers last week. This week up on Zoom, we have members, representatives from VBSR, and then we have Bill Driscoll's here from Associated Industries of Vermont. And then we're going to start with Aaron Siegrist, who is with the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association. Good to see you in 3D.
Nice to see you all. Welcome back.
Welcome back to you too. We'll go around the table. Obviously, some of us are missing, but Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury.
Representative Claudia Lamont from Lamont, Washington.
Joe Parsons, Newbury, Topsom, and Groton.
Emily Krasno, South Burlington.
Caleb Elder, the Bristol area.
Elizabeth Burrows, Windsor 1, which is Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor.
Larry Labor, Essex, Orleans, District 1.
Mary Howard, Rutland District 6.
Robin Chestnut Tangerman, Rutland Bennington District. I said it that time.
So Erin is here again as the lead advocate or the president of the Grocers Association. She'll go into more detail, obviously, but I think we'll have you over the course of the next 2 years on anything dealing with wages, benefits, perhaps housing, and whatever issues that, I think we've both been here long enough to know that the issues are cyclical, but it sounds like they're all congregating here, this year especially with the addition of the housing,
right?
The importance of housing, and so we'll see Erin on those issues, and then again, as an advocate, as a lobbyist, they'll have opinions about perhaps everything. So,
yes. Yeah.
So with that, Erin, please welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. A lot of freshmen on the committee, so welcome. Congratulations.
And 9 of us are new from last year.
Yes.
To the committee. So while there's some people who are serving their second or third terms, 9 of us are new. So
yeah. It's exciting.
Kind of like a pure introduction today.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to jump in. So as the chair said, my name is Aaron Siegrist. I am the president of Vermont Retail and Grocers Association. So it's the Retail Association and the Grocers Association merged in 2014, and now I represent that organization as a whole. I'm also the executive director of the Vermont Specialty Food Association. And I'll do a quick plug. We have our legislative day and Vermont Specialty Food and Beverage tasting February 9th. It's a Thursday, 2 weeks from tomorrow, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock over at the Capitol Plaza. Please join us. There will be a lot of Vermont-made products, food and beverage. So after you hit the floor, come on over and mingle with everybody. So as far as Vermont Retail and Grocers Association is concerned, our membership is inclusive of a variety of different business types and models. We represent the retailers, the grocers, so the clothing store, the large grocers, the small independent grocers, convenience stores, distributors, again, food producers, and then business service members. So it could be the attorneys or insurance brokers who want access to retailers. Of the retail and food related members, our membership represents just about 2,000 retail outlets around the state. So we have many, many small independent retailers and grocers, but we do also have the larger stores who have multiple locations. As Chairman Stevens said, we represent retailers. So retail touches many of the committees within this building. So you will certainly see me running around, from committee to committee. But I'm here most of my days. So please feel free to stop me in the halls or shoot me an email, or my cell number is on the website also. So you have full access to me. if you have questions. Some of the issues, and this certainly is not an exhaustive list, Vermont's housing stock is an absolute issue for our retailers. Much of the discussion around workforce development has surrounded attracting new workers, but also we have workers who may be relocating within the state for new jobs. And many of our business owners have shared that their employees are having a hard time finding housing as well. So we need to really touch all aspects within the spectrum of housing. Affordable housing is important all the way up to catering to whoever wants to move to Vermont. Obviously, we need to address the Act 250 process and the several other issues that relate to housing, but we really need to focus on addressing the housing issue this year or at the latest next year. Not related to this committee, but we do support obviously increasing training opportunities or career technical education. So I know that last year one of the programs covered the cost for meat cutting training, which is a huge shortage. We're facing a huge shortage here in Vermont. And so we were really excited to see that, but you'll hear a little bit about training opportunities that we're very supportive of. And then also Chair Stevens talked a little bit about labor issues. So access to childcare has been magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic specifically. I think we all know that there is a significant issue with the child care system here in Vermont. So we are supportive of figuring out how to strengthen and grow that system. I think the semantics will, the discussion will come down to semantics, right? How do we pay for it and what does that look like? So we're happy to have constructive conversations with you here in this room and in the hallways. And then, of course, paid family and medical leave. And, we have concerns about what that looks like for small retailers and what that impact will be. We very much understand we all need to take some time. We just want to make sure that we're a partner in the conversation and making sure that small businesses will not be negatively impacted. And again, it comes down to how it looks and who's paying for it. So we look forward to constructive discussions about that. And then last one I will touch on briefly. Again, I don't think it really comes into this committee, but retail theft. I'm taking every opportunity I can to share with everyone that retail theft is a significant issue in Vermont, not just in Chittenden County. We're talking about Bennington and Rutland and Springfield, and it has touched every single community. So prioritizing the safety of our employees has been and continues to be at the helm of every employer's business planning, and not just employees, but our customers as well. The sale of fraudulent goods has become a $510 billion industry in the country. And that was a January 2020 report. I'm pretty sure that has increased since. Nearly 67% of asset protection managers and leading retailers surveyed report that a moderate to considerable increase, they've seen a moderate to considerable increase in retail crime. We had some retailers come in last year and testify in the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is not just feeling unsafe. It is actually physically being unsafe for some of these loss prevention workers. There's one retailer up on Church Street who has a loss prevention lead, or had a loss prevention lead, who had a broken nose, broken ribs, broken arm, as they were running after thieves. So this is unfortunately a physical issue. And it's not just our retail employees or the cost to retailers, it's customers as well. Customers are really uncomfortable to be walking around in stores sometimes. I know that there's a large store in South Burlington has been on the record a couple of times talking about organized retail crime. So we want to bring that to the forefront. It's also happening in grocery stores. It's not necessarily as physical, But you can imagine people filling up a cart full of whatever it is they want, and they have become so creative to the point where they've started to stick a SKU on the back of their hand, and they'll check themselves out, and they'll, it's maybe a $2 SKU instead of a $25 steak, and instead of scanning the steak, they'll scan the back of their hand with a fake SKU, and so thieves are getting very creative, and it's a significant issue, not only to retailers, customers, and their employees, but also the revenue of the state. So, wanted to highlight that a little bit. I'm happy to answer questions, and again, I'm here all the time, so please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Do you, are all of your members bricks and mortar stores, or do you also have online?
All of our members are brick and mortar. Some of those members have online stores, but we represent brick and mortar retail in Vermont.
On the housing issue, we of course are anxious to have constructive conversations about it as well, and just welcome any ideas. One thing that has come up, so not quietly, but it hasn't been huge, but there's a conversation brewing about, well, we'll turn commercial properties into housing. Now, I know a retail store, a former supermarket is probably not the owner of the building, they're probably the lessee of the building that they may be vacating.
Yeah.
But thoughts about that from,
Yeah.
having, or not just commercial spots into housing, the thought of having congregate housing in a vacant mall is kind of weird. Sounds like a 1990s movie.
Yeah.
But the other piece is companies, and maybe Bill, you can address this for as well, perhaps not, but just the idea that companies are starting to talk about developing housing specifically for their employees.
Yeah.
Which is pretty old school and historically has not been successful.
Yeah.
But people are so desperate for housing that they're thinking that maybe building an apartment unit for I don't know if that's how that's traveling in your world.
Yeah, that's a good question. I will be completely honest, I have not heard my retailers talking about building housing for their employees. As far as vacant stores and developers redesigning or redeveloping for housing, additional housing, that is certainly something, there's an example up in South Burlington where a new developer just purchased a mall, and they're talking about building up and redeveloping, and providing housing and retail space within the same location. We are seeing that across the country, and we're supportive of any creative opportunity that developers and the state can come up with. But I will say I've not heard my retailers talking about building housing for their employees. I think that's hospitals and universities are talking about that. But
Burlington did that.
yeah.
Representative Krasnow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and also like the tech industry
Yes.
and the new over in my district in Tech Park and et cetera. And I was gonna say also about the mall. Yeah, so not a day doesn't go by, when we're talking about housing where I live, that someone says, well, why can't we, the Sears building has been vacant for years now.
Yeah.
Two Sears buildings, completely vacant. The Pizza Hut on Shelburne Road, just vacant. I mean, there is a lot of, the new mall owner wants to do mixed use. About once a week, I'll meet with business owners in South Burlington and hear what's going on and in the mall and ask them, if they're concerned. I think the other thing too is staffing has really been a challenge. We have we have a new Chipotle that hasn't even been able to open because we don't have anyone to work there.
Right.
So that's, I think, a big issue, as well, is that there's just not enough staffing for these places.
It's a huge
And
issue.
So I don't know what's gonna happen, but the mall hopefully will start to move, because it's, thank you.
Representative Older?
Oh, sorry, I'm actually all set.
All right, any further questions for Erin right now? Then we'll see her back on any number of issues.
Yes.
Yes, Representative Labor.
Thank you. You mentioned briefly Act 250. I suspect you're looking forward to some remodeling of it. In my campaign, I talked to several developers and contractors. They're not disappointed with Act 250 for what it covers. They were disappointed in Act 250 permit application timelines and the time it takes for it to come back, plus the fees that need to accompany it. And speaking with one property owner who property was burnt down, the insurance company had to allow for $60,000 for permit process to rebuild that business. So it's not what Act 250 hasn't done, it's what they need to do. The environment is fine.
Right. It's the.
From their point of view, the
Right.
environment's fine.
It's the process
It's
and.
the process. Did you find that in your membership coming to you and expressing the same?
Yes, yeah, the process, many of them have shared with me that, I'm learning a lot these days. You have to be your own advocate, right? Whether it's in a hospital setting or if it's, in a, Act 250 process, building process, anything, you have to be your own advocate. And, many of my members that I've spoken to about the Act 250 process is they're trying to run a business and they're being their own advocate and trying to, they're serving as the between different agencies and trying to get an application executed, and it's a tough process to manage when you aren't the expert in that process, right? So you're right, it's not Act 250, it's the process and the timeline.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me to clarify that too.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for your time. I'd like to stay, but
Do you have a card? Testimony. I do, yes. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to stay, but if you have to go, you're more than,
I
yeah.
don't know if I'm that important.
Thank you so much.
The traffic. Good. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, Erin and I are chasing each other today. I'm following her in the next committee too.
Glad to have gotten you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks. Appreciate being here and having the opportunity. So my name is Bill Driscoll. I'm Vice President of Associated Industries of Vermont. We represent primarily the manufacturing sector in the state. AIV has been around for a little over 100 years. I was just counting up. This is my 21st session. So been around a bit as well. As you can imagine, manufacturing obviously shares many issues and concerns in common with other business sectors. There are some things that affect us more than others, but otherwise, I think especially for this committee, you'll find that they're pretty common across the board. Really, a lot of our concerns or issues come down in many cases just kind of down to cost effectiveness and need. And that's because Vermont has generally tended over the years to be either at or near the top of the country in terms of being the most expensive state to manufacture. And that's not because we are necessarily at the top of every single category, but we're near the top of every single category. So, so there's a lot of cost sensitivity. And manufacturing is somewhat unique among other types of businesses where, because we compete nationally and globally, there's really not an opportunity. There's much more limited opportunity to pass on costs. through prices. So we tend to be pretty sensitive about that. I think in terms of some of the issues here, one of the interesting growing sort of areas of concern or challenges for manufacturing is in the workforce. We've historically had a very high quality workforce, and that has helped keep us competitive despite some of the other challenges. But over the years, as sort of the skill and training needs have increased, our sort of schools and other resources haven't necessarily kept up with the kind of education or background that we've needed. So it has been a challenge in recent years to find skilled workers to come into the workforce. But now, as I'm sure you've heard, it's not just manufacturing. It's many places it's challenging to find anybody at all. And so the way that our folks have dealt with that is, one, it's significantly increased some of the starting pay. I mean, manufacturing has always been one of the highest compensating sectors for folks, but there's been a need to increase that further and also do more in-house training. So those two factors, are obviously impacting, the labor costs in the state. And there are definitely ways that the state can help with that. We've got some good training programs and some other resources to help out. But that's I would say that's sort of an emerging trend in terms of the challenges that we're facing here. I guess I would say, just kind of going off on what you were asking about before, Mr. Chairman, certainly interesting, and housing is of course an issue for us, and I have heard about companies getting interested in somehow playing a more direct role in providing housing. I think that's probably an area where we can look for more opportunities for the state to help out with that, or you'll find some sort of partnership be worth exploring. And even I think, something that I've been interested in a long time, and, there are still challenges, but even looking at childcare and that issue, obviously most manufacturing in Vermont, like most businesses, are on the smaller side, but you do find businesses of a certain scale. And so the opportunity to perhaps look at in-house childcare, or even in like an industrial park, sort of pooling it, not that there aren't plenty of challenges, but I think that would be an area to look at as well on that front. So.
Can you give us an idea of when you say manufacturing?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of manufacturing facilities are hidden from all of us. Who does that mean? What kind of manufacturing are we talking about?
Vermont, I would say it's pretty much anything you can imagine. It's a very diverse area or sector. And sometimes it'd be very surprising, like some of the obscure things that you would never sort of think about. But yeah, I mean, I think mostly until the 80s, I think we had a pretty high concentration in machine tooling, especially in the southeastern part of the state. We have lost a lot of our wood product manufacturers. That sector has taken a hit. But in terms of like, again, a lot of component manufacturing, a lot of electronics, plastics, things like that. I mean, literally, it's just, if you can think of it, there's a good chance that there's something like that here in Vermont.
Well, it's easy just to say, manufacturers, and not realize. I mean, I worked on a farm that produced chickens for sale. Am I a manufacturer? And does that include distillers or beer makers or what have you?
I mean, we would certainly argue that food manufacturing, food products is definitely a form of manufacturing.
Yeah. So again, without really delving into deep, opinions about anything, because again, it could be, that there will be all the same issues that you're just talking about will come forward, and you'll let us know when they affect the industries and how they affect the industries. Which now we're closer to the cafeteria, we won't be lost, unless, except the door says education, and everybody thinks of it as the agricultural room.
I still do that. I've made that mistake already. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions for Bill? Yes.
To follow up on the chair's question, does manufacturing include quarries and sawmills, or are those?
Yes. Yes.
So it's also kind of production of raw material or can.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's if you're making it, it's sort of manufacturing. Now, definitely, people can quibble when it gets to certain kind of, aggregate or raw material or something like that. I know that apparently the tax department doesn't think that firewood production is manufacturing. I can't remember why that came up, but that came out of nowhere last year. So I think there are people who will, how technical you really want to get. People might parse out some things like that, but generally, and including if you're looking at sort of analyzing the labor market or workforce or things like that, as you sort of go up the pyramid of consolidating groups, things like mining and natural resource type production gets lumped in with manufacturing pretty early on as you go up the chain.
And I used to hear, challenges to manufacturing in Vermont were high energy prices, and inadequate transportation networks. Are those? I imagine those are still true, but have just been eclipsed by housing and workforce, or is?
No, I wouldn't say that they've been eclipsed. There are transportation challenges, but definitely energy is still a very serious issue. There's a little bit of jostling in New England in terms of how our industrial and commercial rates compare to other states. But certainly once you get out of New England, for the vast majority of the country, our electric rates are much, much higher than they are elsewhere. And that's one of those areas that is a particular concern to manufacturing because it's a very energy intensive sector. So that's an issue. It is challenging because there are some inherent disadvantages that we have, just the nature of the New England grid and how we're connected or not connected to the rest of the country or to Canada. We don't have as many low cost options, and then policies that we've decided to go forward on with how we're promoting renewable energy or how we're promoting efficiency. I think we would argue that they've been done maybe in a more costly way than necessary. So there's some self-inflicted cost issues, but as well as some inherent natural cost issues there.
You also?
I'm sure I could come up with more, but
within a few weeks, we won't be able to keep you all quiet. So
I'm just going to rely on Aaron. Plus, Representative Howard has agreed to do whatever I ask, right?
Of course. Of course.
All right, thanks, Bill. Thanks for coming in, and you're in the building often now that we're back in the building often, as opposed to simply being online. But you're available.
Yeah. And I don't have a card, but I'll send around. Ron has my email. So.
All right, thank you so much. All right, next up is on Zoom, we have Jordan Giacona from VBSR along with Roxanne. Roxanne, welcome to the committee. I don't think we've had you in the committee before, but again, I'll reiterate that I'm asking you as an introduction to introduce VBSR and what your focus is. You're a business organization with some social responsibility. I'll ask you to define what that means and how it affects the policies that you support or work on or try to promulgate. So with that, welcome. I don't know who's starting, but I have Jordan next on the list, but I don't know if that's how you guys had planned it.
I think I'll open us up briefly. And, for the record, Jordan Giacona, Public Policy Manager with Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. So Chair Stevens and distinguished members of the committee, certainly appreciate the opportunity to join you today and appreciate the flexibility from the remote aspect. I'm typically in the building, but had to do a little desk work today. So we'll give you sort of a soup to nuts overview of VBSR and our core priorities for the session. I will note that I'll be soon transitioning out of the organization. So wanted to make sure to make this connection with our very brave and noble leader, Roxanne. So with that, I will turn it over to Roxanne to give sort of an overview of VBSR, our core ethos, and then I will happily run through our legislative priorities and we can dive right into Q&A. So take it away, Roxanne.
Thanks, Jordan.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Chair Stevens and members of the committee. It's such a pleasure to have some time with you today. For the record, my name is Roxanne Vogt, and I'm the Executive Director of Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. And as Chair Stevens said, we go by VBSR. So yes, Jordan is leaving. I'm working furiously on finding his replacement, and I look forward to connecting you with that person when they're identified. In the meantime, I really do appreciate this time as an introduction, and it will definitely be a resource to you, and we'll share a little bit more about how specifically I can do that at the end here. So I love the question of what social responsibility is and what that means to VBSR. I would say, put simply, it's leveraging for us the power of business for social and environmental impact. And of course, as we work on all of these issues that have been discussed today, we know that social and environmental impact are not two separate areas of focus, but very much interconnected. So look forward to using that lens. I'm going to give a broad overview of VBSR and specifically our role in state policy and the policy landscape. So the key thing to know is that we are first and foremost a business association. We're a nonprofit statewide business association. We have 700 members across the state. And what we do is we champion business as a force for good. And that shows up in our education and training that we do for our members, which is often just highlighting the incredible examples that we have amongst our Vermont businesses. We also bring them together to build community and get to know each other. And then we do advocacy. We bring their collective voice to policymakers, to influencers to help shape the public narrative and the important decisions that you all will make. So that's a little bit about VBSR in terms of our ethos. I will share that we are a very diverse group. And that's important to know. We are diverse geographically, in terms of size of business, in terms of stage of business. So we have startups, we have growth stage, we have really well-established international brands. We have very small businesses, sole proprietors. We have individual students. And then Vermonters who are just interested in the work that we do and do see business as a force for good. So that's a little bit about the scope of our organization. In terms of structure, we have a wonderful board of 20 members that represent, again, that full diversity of size and stage of business and so on. And then we have 7 committees that help advance our mission. And one of those is our Public Policy Committee. So that's the committee that guides our advocacy through the legislative session and during the rest of the year. And then I'm very proud to say that we have 7 staff, which thanks to our new ways of working are spread across the state in 4 different counties from St. Albans down to Brattleboro. And we're able to leverage that statewide presence to be able to engage with our membership in various ways. Yes, including virtual experiences, but also we get our members together in person as much as possible. So that's a little bit about VBSR. And now I'd like to share with you just a little bit of our history of policymaking. So we started in 1991 as a small group of very innovative business people. And that has grown over 30 years to be a very large organization, which has tens of thousands of people involved in it. When you consider all of the employees, we have National Life and the Medical Center, the network, all of the major employers. So it's a really large group. And so part of what we have done over the years is to advocate on behalf of those employees, and then what that massive impact can be when those businesses are positively contributing to their communities and positively contributing to the natural environment around them. So policy has always been core to our theory of change. It's certainly evolved over the years, but we're really proud of the way we've been able to bring the voice to the issues that bring the business voice to the issues that are so important to us. So I'm going to share a few of the successes we've had over 30 years that I'm particularly proud of. Farm to Plate, home solar investment, marriage equality and ban the box, clean water investment, earned paid sick leave, increasing the minimum wage, and climate action. And I should say that is a big range of areas of focus. And that is definitely an aspect of our organization that's probably unique related to some of the other business organizations and those focused on economic development. So yes, we are a business association, and we are also weighing in on a lot of non-business issues, because again, we know that they affect the people and the planet that we believe business should be serving. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that we have access to a whole lot of business owners who would love to talk to you. They would love to talk to you in formal ways. They would love to be invited in to testify if that would be helpful to you. And during this interim period, while we're transitioning from Jordan, who's been a fabulous advocate for VBSR and our membership, into the next person in that role, I will absolutely be available to you for connecting with our members, for coming in and being able to be a voice for them when that is helpful, and also just to help get your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the business community. So just know that that invitation is always there. What we'll be doing on our end are we're going to be focusing on a few different tactics in terms of our collective action. So we're going to be looking at media campaigns and op-eds and letters to the editor. We do a lot of education and training, trying to educate our members on the issues, and we welcome you into those conversations. We have a lot of opportunities for connecting you directly with large groups of businesses at once. And then also when we have an issue that we think warrants it, we'll be coming into the building to share our story directly as part of lobby days. So that's a little bit about the history of our policymaking and why it is so important to VBSR. And I want to just quickly share a couple more things. One, we have some great data that we've collected from our members. We do an annual membership survey, and I want to share with you highlights from the most recent survey, which happened in August and September of last year. So the big one, no surprise, I'm sure it's going to be the broken record for this session. While the bulk of our policy issues we're focusing on this year are carryovers from last session, no surprise, housing has jumped to the top with a historic margin. So housing, climate, childcare, and healthcare are the top issues that our membership would like us to focus on this session. Housing, climate, childcare, healthcare. I will say I have 10 years of experience with VBSR wearing different hats. I have never in that time seen such a clear response to the question of what we should be focusing on, with housing so clearly at the top there. And also when we, I'll share a stat about what's driving the labor market crisis. And it's also, of course, showing up there. So just something specific about what members are saying on housing. Short-term rental market, high number of vacation and second homes. This was the top driver they saw for the housing crisis. Interestingly, Act 250 ranked lowest for our membership. So that gives you a sense of some of the things they're thinking about as you dig into housing further. When we asked about the top drivers of the labor shortage, again, affordable housing options came in at number one. 80% of respondents said clearly that was number one for them. And then after that, wages and compensation and lack of access to affordable, high quality childcare. So it's worth sharing that with all of this data, here's what we know. Here's what I know about our membership. They have historically had better than average retention rates because they have already integrated a lot of the policies that tend to attract and retain employees, such as support for paid family and medical leave, childcare, flexibility in the workplace. Some of these things have policy implications, some of them don't, but they do have practices that are generally valued by employees, and that helps with their ability to attract and retain them. What I am seeing now, though, is that they cannot clearly continue to shoulder the burden of the affordability crisis. And they need their employees to be able to take care of their own needs with housing and childcare and just be able to show up and do work. And if we can get businesses to stop to focus so much on the basic human needs of their employees, they will be able to do what they do best, which is build and grow great jobs, be partners in their communities to mutual benefit, and then be partners to you all as policymakers to come up with creative and pragmatic solutions. So here's my final invitation, then I'm going to turn it over to Jordan to talk us through our issues. You have very hard decisions to make. I invite you to let us be a partner because our members have historically been willing to take risks and try out new things. They have models that can be replicated, that can be scaled up, that can be piloted. And we would love to share all of that with you and have that be a resource as you go through and tackle the work ahead. So thank you for the time. And I'm now going to turn it over to Jordan.
Thank you, Roxanne. And again, sort of in the continued theme, a lot of carryovers as far as our legislative priorities for this session, and largely reflective, I would say, of a mixture of things. So with our approval process, what we typically do is we poll the membership to get a sense of what their most pressing issues and challenges are, opportunities as well, and then bring that to VBSR's Public Policy Committee, who then sort of deliberates and picks through the data, thinks about, tries to read the political tea leaves to what extent we can, and then runs that up to the board. So it goes through a very rigorous approval process. But so what we've come across today, and again, not a ton of big surprises here. So climate and clean energy. So we still feel that climate change remains a very critical threat to our communities, our ecosystems, our shared economy. We see billions of dollars in fossil fuel spending flowing out of the state's economy on a year-over-year basis, whereas clean energy alternatives keep a much higher share of dollars flowing within our local economies. So looking forward to continuing to work on a host of different issues. I'd say our key bills are namely the 100% Renewable Energy Standard Bill, the Affordable Heating Act, and then the Affordable Transportation Act. But I would note for this committee, as far as your jurisdiction, there's a ton of interest as far as workforce development initiatives within the climate and clean energy space. So that's largely fallen within Commerce and Economics, Economic Development's bailiwick, but would love to sort of get additional feedback from this committee and others. In addition to that, so as Roxanne mentioned, housing, Vermont's workforce ranked as the top issue impacting Vermont businesses by a massive margin. It was the highest percentage count I've ever seen in a polling. I believe it was like 62% if memory serves. So again, as you all well know, we have housing stock that's extremely low. We have costs that are skyrocketing, workforce shortages within our building sectors, and employers literally have either employees turning down jobs as they're coming into the state due to the housing crisis, or actually leaving their jobs because, say, their leases are up and the apartment that they're living in is being sold. They simply cannot find new housing. So appreciated that there's been discussion already about sort of the value of commercial conversion incentives, employer-employee partnership grant programs as well. And then also really excited to see some reforms, namely as it relates to our planning and zoning, as we're seeing coming together as part of this broader housing omnibus. So looking forward to working with folks in that space. Healthcare continues to be a big one, a major expense for a lot of our employers who really pride themselves on running people first workplaces. So in the past, and what our focus is largely going to continue to be, is sort of how do we deliver a lot of near-term cost savings for commercial payers, whilst also keeping our eye on the prize as it relates to the implementation of Vermont's all-payer model, the next agreement with the state's accountable care organization. So a good example, one that we had tackled last year, was decoupling Vermont's individual versus small group insurance pools and using the advanced premium tax credit to sort of offset the cost of that. That delivered a lot of near-term cost savings, not only for commercial payers, but for individuals as well. And then lastly, we've sort of put these two together under what we refer to as the care economy, but they're two, I suppose, separate bills that this committee will certainly hear about. And that's namely childcare and paid family and medical leave. And the reason why I address both of these together is VBSR really believes that Vermont employees need care at really every stage of their lives, from their early childhood through their mid-careers and into their later stages of life. So whether you're looking to welcome a new family member, whether you've sustained an injury, you need care for your children while you're at work, we really believe that investing in these types of initiatives reaps very, very strong economic returns. So as many are already familiar, a big hot button issue will be trying to find a long-term sustainable public funding mechanism for enacting H171 and getting an affordable, high-quality childcare system online, and then also working to advance and fund a paid family and medical leave program that's actionable, it's affordable, it's just. So yeah, that encapsulates the bulk of it. But as Roxanne's mentioned, we're happy to be a resource. We have many businesses who feel very passionate about this issue, who are ready to tell their stories. So happy to help in whatever way we can, and happy to field questions as well.
You mentioned that some of your businesses, some of your members may already have a program like paid family medical leave. They may have instituted on their own. It's early in the process. We're only going to hear a sponsorship review of it this morning, and we'll get into the details of costs and sustainability as we take up the bill. But do you have members who could speak to the success or failure of such a program that they've purchased on the market from private insurance companies, or cost per employee or per dollar, which is what we'll be addressing?
Absolutely. So I would note a couple pieces. So for one, I believe this was our 2022 polling indicated that of VBSR's total membership, 50% right now offer paid family and medical leave as part of their benefits packages. That's actually about an 8% increase since the previous poll, and it's basically gone up sort of steadily over the past few years with a real spike with the arrival of COVID-19. But I would say, yeah, plenty of employers who have adopted their own paid family and medical leave programs and can speak to the costs, speak to the benefits and successes. I also have some who are trying to take them on, but are trying to make the financials work as well. So, as you all may recall, Morgan Nichols, formerly MSA, and I had worked really intensely on a COVID paid leave grant program. And as I said then, I'll say now, that remaining 50% of employers who don't presently offer paid family and medical leave aren't doing that, I think, because they don't want to, but simply because they can't afford to. So we certainly have employers who can sort of speak to both sides of that coin.
Great. And again, we will. I know that regardless of who is in the building or on Zoom, that VBSR will be sharing their thoughts on the issues that come across. We've done a lot of work, as you listed off. As you listed off the programs, I was checking it off, going, oh, that's House General. Oh, that's House General. And so I'm sure we'll see you again and again over the next couple of years. So, other questions? Yes, Representative Chestnut-Tangeman.
Thank you for this overview. I want to express my personal frustration that so many of your events are in Burlington.
Except for the ones that are in Canton.
Where's that?
I've always wondered, because VBSR is just so diametrically different from my standard stereotypical perception of a business group. And I'm just thinking about you being values driven, and how much within the organization, how much education of members do you do to reach accord on priorities?
Roxanne, you want to take that one, or should I?
Go for it.
I would probably say so. An excellent question. I think as it relates to legislative priorities, it's a mixture of things. So in my case, attending various member-driven events throughout the state, connecting directly with our members across different counties to get a sense of sort of really just more pulse checks, so to speak. So trying to come in, get a sense of what their biggest challenges have been through the year. And then in addition to that, hosting policy forums and webinars as well. So if there's more remote access, if folks can't make the trek, we try to do that as well to sort of collect additional feedback from folks. And then I'd say that, the polling is a little bit more expedient in that way, in that it'll largely confirm a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from employers. And then that's passed even further up to the Public Policy Committee. So actually leading up to 2022, for example, we had sort of a set of questions that we were consistently asking a lot of our members, namely as it related to workforce development, and came up with a pretty compelling list of sort of what was ranked as the top contributors. So not only was that later confirmed via our polling, but also sort of gathered anecdotally. So a few different ways. And then I'd also say additionally, what we typically do, and COVID has unfortunately largely sort of gotten in the way of this, but in the summers, we usually do what we refer to as summer study committees. So this is if we have an outstanding question about a specific piece of legislation, if we're interested in putting together a bill, we assemble teams of issue experts who then go across the state and try and solicit feedback from members to help to inform that legislation or that sort of issue paper that we put together.
Thank you.
Representative Krasna.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Jordan, for your work, and whatever you're off to next, I'm sure they'll be lucky to have you, and good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a joy representing VBSR. It's definitely a very bittersweet transition, and I'd say the bitter is definitely because of all the great people like you all that I have the opportunity to work with. So greatly appreciate it. And I'm not going far. I'm still working remotely, so I'll be in the state. I'm not quite out of your hair just yet.
Okay.
Question about housing. Sometimes sitting in this chair, I feel like business groups, advocates, stakeholders, whatever we want to call them, are waiting for us to come up with a solution. And sometimes I feel like we're just, whatever solutions we can come up with, people are just going to throw stuff at us. That's part of the job. I get it. I like it when people take a lead, or, yes, you can influence us, if you will, in the cafeteria, but when you talk about data or when you talk about helping for solutions, can you give us some hope that we can have the conversation, so it's not just waiting for us to do something? Because this, to think inside or outside of a box requires, sitting around and figuring it out. And sometimes mistakes are made, sometimes steps are misstepped or what have you. But I'm just curious to know, and I guess this is more for Roxanne, because Jordan, you're now useless to us. Thank you. But
that's on the record.
Only as of now. But it's I'm just inviting you, as much as you're inviting us, to just be participating in the conversation, because housing is clearly a difficult nut, and what has to be done in Burlington is different than what has to happen in Morgan or in West Rutland or Bennington. So I just want to invite you to, if there are members that are that can help the conversation without it just being, yes, we know it's broken, you know, we do know it's broken in some way, or we have to try to help provide the tools for people to come together and build essentially and support housing or whatever policies you're advocating for. It's just an invitation. It's not a criticism. It's not a, you know, I don't expect you to have an answer, but I do want to make sure that you've been invited into the room and into the conversation, because that's the best way for us to do our work as well. And I don't really apologize, but I apologize for getting a laugh line out of your exit line, Jordan. So any further questions for our folks from VBSR? All right, thank you for sharing your time, and Roxanne, don't be a stranger, and Jordan, don't be a stranger. We'll see you when we see you.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.
It's getting late in the day, sorry about that.